Welcome, everyone, to Ladder Daily Digest. We're back with Sheena Petersen for the rest of the story. We left last episode with a cliffhanger. Sheena was starting to find out things that she hadn't heard about before about the church, and she's back now to explain what happened from that point forward. Welcome back, Sheena.
Thank you so much.
Welcome back.
And I'm happy to be back, and I'm happy that I get to have Maven here and meet Maven as well. So this is exciting. So I guess
I think you had
kinda...
left off. Yeah, sorry. So I saw the other one, the first one, and I'm sorry I couldn't be there for it, but I'm glad that we're going to now continue going. And there was so much that I related to with your story, but I don't want to burden, I guess, this half of that with my thoughts on the first one. But you had discovered the CES letter. That's what I remember towards the end there. Yeah.
Yes.
And this is all after polygamy. So there's a lot you and your husband working through polygamy, and then the CES letter came.
Right.
And this is around Thanksgiving or Christmas time last year?
No. So this was probably actually about 2 years ago and around like the spring of 2022.
Okay.
So I was, at that point I had pretty much beginning of summer, end of spring, somewhere in there. And I was really spiraling at that point because the CES letter, I had heard about it through some of the other podcasting channels. And so I decided to look it up, and I wanted to look at what the talking points were about polygamy. And I was all on board with it, but then I started noticing some other stuff, Joseph Smith treasure digging and his magic worldview and stuff like that. And that just opened up a whole new can of worms for me. And I was just wrecked. Trying to go through this and trying to figure out how I was going to be one of those nuanced Mormons. And I had been trying that since digging into the actual history and documents of polygamy. And I was going to church still, but I was starting to feel like I didn't know how I was going to make it work and keep everything together. And so it was, I couldn't even bring myself to read through the letter. I had the time to back then, but I just didn't have the courage to. And now I just don't really have the time. But I mean, it's a lot that I've discovered. It's long. And I think I've discovered a lot of the information. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think, and that's also kind of one of the reasons I really try to give my husband some space and some room to be able to figure this out for himself too, because it's such an individual journey, and it's you can't just dump on somebody and expect them to, feel or come to a solid state of mind after that, because I did not feel solid. I was so scared. And so, I mean, I
want to ask about that. Did he know you were reading the CES letter? Did he not want to or want to? Because you were you were together on the polygamy stuff. So this is kind of where you start to go a little further, I guess, than he was willing to go. So what was that like?
Yeah. So it was a little bit rough at first. I mean, I feel like my husband's a very kind and understanding person, and he's a really great listener. And so he, it's not like I ever felt any major judgment or anything from him, but it was more that I was I would just explain it to him look, I have to know what the heck actually happened here, because I can't figure out how it makes sense with this gospel of Jesus Christ. How am I supposed to be happy with you in the next life? And so he, definitely wasn't on board with the polygamy thing. But then, when I started discovering these other things and telling him Joseph Smith's character, this is just, in my mind, more about his character that is inconsistent again with what we are taught as members of the church, to be behaving at, and so when I started telling him about these things.
Do you remember what your callings were at the time?
Let's see. I think for a while he was in charge of doing the roles in like gospel doctrine and stuff, like all the, well, he was just, in charge of like all the class roles. So, and then I don't
Maybe
even know
in
if I
Sunday
had a
school
calling at that
presidency.
point. Yeah,
I
yeah, I
think
think he
so.
was one of the
Yeah.
secretaries. Yeah. And but that's basically mostly what he did. He just did roles.
Yeah.
He'd print them out, bring them, and then collect them and give
Checking
them to
attendance.
whoever. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So and then at the time, like I can't even remember if I had a calling. If I did, I think it was in the primary actually. No, I was actually I was teaching like the CTR fives or something like that, with a friend of mine. And I think I remember that just because I remember her telling, like we were teaching a lesson together and she was talking about this thing that happened in the scriptures. And I was like, that just seems so insane and far-fetched. And here I'm sitting there like, am I just losing my faith or am I just sobering up? I don't know. Like I couldn't figure things out and I was like, I'm just not going to worry about it. But yeah, so my husband, when I started telling him some of these other things that I was learning about Joseph Smith and his character and how this all started to really add up, even though it was terrifying to learn about, I just remember like one of the first comments he made because he was scared was like, you're just getting further and further away. And I was like, but this is actually the history. Like, like you have to understand, I'm not just randomly searching like anti-Mormon doctrine. Like, there's actual logic like laid out here and then references and all sorts of things. Like, you know, and
Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, it was, it was
I
somewhat
think that
difficult
that
at first,
makes me
but
think of, like, members are so afraid of anti-material, they don't even know what it is,
they
or
don't. Yeah, you
like,
don't.
zero clue. And I know I had zero clue, but there's almost this idea that, like, "Ah, it must be bad because it's so powerful that when people are
Yeah,
willing to just be even reading it, they'll just go off the deep end." And I know I used to think about, I I used to think people would read anti-material and just instantly believe it, like, it could literally say anything. It could say, like, Joseph Smith sacrificed babies or something, and they'd be like, "Oh my gosh,
yeah,
he sacrificed babies. I can't believe I've been a
yeah,
Mormon my whole life," you know? It never occurred to me that
yes,
they were, you know, that it that people, like me, could be rational and read that and be like, "Well, who said that? What's the source for that? Nobody
yes,
else is saying that. Nobody else believes that. Okay, that's dumb. Then no, I'm not going to believe that." So there's a reason to believe, but again, you can't when you're fully in that material is so dangerous. Yeah. So it's just
yeah,
there's this vague idea of just like, I don't know, you Satan's grabbing you, to your faithful friends
exactly.
and family. That's what it seems like, and
Which which
yeah.
almost kind of supports this idea that Satan is like almost more powerful than God.
Mhm.
Because it's like, well, how when I started thinking about that, I was like, I don't it doesn't make any sense that we would be so weak and so fragile as members of the church who are supposed to be part of God's like one true church, that the devil would so easily be able to pull us away if we were to even just look at this stuff.
Right.
It's just kind of
Just
ridiculous.
if you're doing all
And
the things, you're reading your scriptures, you're
yeah,
praying, because those are all supposed to keep you in, and you're going to church, but yeah,
yeah.
if you just crack open this book and it's all done for. Yeah. Satan's
Yeah,
pretty
it's like, well,
powerful
then
if that's
I
the case.
guess God's messaging is not on point then if Satan is so easily like pulling people away and so quickly. It's like, yeah,
And
I
people
don't
who
know.
want to stay.
Yes,
There's so many
exactly.
people. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was like a really huge message that I basically had to articulate to my husband. I think one of the biggest points for me after that, as I kept going, because I think I talked to my brother about it on the phone because I was like, I don't think he goes to church anymore. Like, I'm pretty sure he doesn't go to church anymore, but I didn't know for sure. And he wasn't really like very out about it. And I just texted him one day and I was like, are you still a member of the church? Like, do you still go? And he's like, why are you asking? And I was like, I'm just like learning some things that I just don't know if this is true. Like, I don't know if the church is true anymore. And he was like, yeah, I don't go. And here are the reasons that I found out. And I was like, those are some of the reasons I'm finding too, And I was like, oh
I
my
have
gosh,
to
this is
pause.
crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry. I just the fact that this interaction has to go this way, I totally understand because we can't talk about it when these kinds of things are happening, and so I think
Yeah.
I mean, when on your brother's end, when he got that text, or, even recently when someone asked me, like, "Are you still in the church?" I'm like, "Ooh, I don't know. I don't know where they're at right
Yeah.
now, and, like, I don't know how to answer
Yeah.
that question because it could open up just I mean, it's a can of worms, you can't once it's out, and you can't,
Yeah.
undo it and bring
Because you
it
don't
back,
know why
and
they're
so
asking. Yeah.
right, yeah, like, are you seeing something in him? Are you like, he could have been coming at it from, like, a faithful perspective, like, "Are you going? Bro, I'm worried about your salvation,"
Yes.
like, if I find out you're not, this is going to be a bad thing, or, like, your situation where it's like, "I need help, and I'm trying to figure out who" and there's always these kind of, like, secretive things that you're kind of looking for,
Yeah.
and I had a friend
Yes.
like that, and I was wrong, it made me I knew she didn't, like, always wear her garments all the time, and sometimes she drank Arizona tea, so I was like, "She might be out, these are symbols, right?" So I told
Yeah.
her, but she was still in and actually, like, going through the discipline to come back into the church, and so that was a really awkward
Okay.
conversation because I didn't I misread the signs, and so anyway,
Yes.
I just could commiserate with this, and I think people who don't understand the church maybe don't realize how, like, scary and fearful of a step that even was to for you to send that message and for your brother to receive it until you could get past that
Yeah.
initial, like, "Okay, we're in the same spot."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think yeah, it was scary for both of us because yeah, I definitely could sense that from his side. He was like, "Why are you asking?" And I'm like like I don't want to hear any lectures, like, from going back to church or any of that stuff. And so I was just like, "No, I need a kindred spirit here." So yeah, it was very much like that. But yeah, so I started looking into some more of those things too, which a lot of his issues he took with like the anachronisms within like the Book of Mormon and stuff, and I started digging into that and listening to the interviews with like Sandra Tanner on Mormon Stories was amazing, and I mean, she knows her stuff. So yeah, that was really interesting to go through, and I was like, oh my gosh, and it's really interesting though to realize like once all this stuff is said and you hear it, you see it and you can't unsee it anymore. And then you wonder, how did I never see this? And it just points so strongly to the fact that we are purposefully kept within this certain parameter of having these blinders on. We're, again, we're only told to look where we're told to look and to not look anywhere else. And it's crazy though, and so you just because you're told it's true, you don't even look for these inconsistencies
Yeah.
that don't
I
align.
once
We're
was
And so,
motivated
blind
to see it.
and now I
Oh, go ahead,
see.
Jean. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so that was really how it started to feel. And I was like, oh my gosh, like you can't unknow these things, you can't unsee them, and it's really obvious now. But you're also told, it oh, when I think about the temple experience too, that I just even when I was super committed, and my husband and I were I was going through for the first time getting ready to get married to him in 2 weeks. So I was taking out my endowments, and I thought the whole thing was crazy. And I was just like, in my head, I was like, this doesn't make a lot of sense. Like the temple had been so talked up my whole life. It was like the pinnacle of what you could aspire to get to, and especially because it represents like heaven on earth, or it's supposed to. And I remember going through it thinking like, well, heaven on earth sure is sexist, and like, I just felt like there was just a whole bunch of sexism, and I couldn't not hear that. And I was really disappointed, but I kind of just shoved it aside, just like I did with the polygamy thing, because I was like, well, I'm excited to get married, and at least with, my husband, I knew that he was a really good man. And so I took comfort in knowing that, well, hearkening to my husband, I was like, well, I'm not doing that. But like, I also don't think he's not that kind of person that's going to be like, hey, I'm the man. I'm the final say around here. He's not that person. And so I was like, well, whatever, we're going to do things our way. But every time we went back, I was like, man, I hate this. And even in like the sealing ceremony, they have the woman go first, and they do the wording for the woman first. And I will never forget that I remember hearing towards the end, like, and you give yourself of him of your own free will and choice. and this you do, in the name of Jesus Christ or whatever. I don't remember the exact wording past that, but I was like, give myself of him, of my own free will and choice. And I was like, well, that's a really interesting little, phrase to put in that. And I thought, well, is it going to say that on his part? And it didn't. And, so it's like, I'm agreeing that I'm a piece of property. I'm giving myself to. It's like, well, see, you did it of your own free will and choice. So you made the choice to do it. It's like, I didn't even know what I was getting into going into this place. And
Yeah.
temple prep is garbage. It does nothing for you. So, I mean, the
It's
only thing that I think was,
non-consensual.
it's
Yeah,
absolutely
just adding that
non-consensual.
clause in there doesn't make it consensual, but they try to, and I think that's
Yeah,
for not for the broader view, but it's for the individual to kind of gaslight us into thinking like, yeah, we're here, we're consenting. But the men
exactly.
receive. That's their
Exactly.
wording, and you receive her unto you. And so yeah. Yep.
And because they can receive as many of the women as they want. I mean, it's that just it made me mad because all I could think about in that moment, and I was listening intently to hear if it was going to be repeated in the wording for my husband. All I could think about was this is so that they can continue to perform, next life polygamy. And I was like, I was really mad. I was not, but I was like, well, it's my wedding day. Gonna shove it out of my money. You end up shoving a
Yeah.
lot of things aside as a member of the church. And I just remember thinking that the temple was not what I had been told it was going to be, and I wasn't really happy with it. I remember asking my husband and like his brother, because it was my sister-in-law and my husband's older brother who's her husband, and his younger brother, and all of us had gone through together, and then some of my roommates, but we were sitting there in like the celestial room afterwards, and I was like, so I mean, the only thing that I feel like was really explained was like this little apron here. It represents the fig leaves, where
Mhm.
Adam and Eve had to cover themselves up. I was like, what's all this stuff? Why do I have to veil my face? I was really pissed about that too. And I was like, why do I have to cover my face? Why do women have to cover their faces here? You know? And I, yeah, it, I just remember them being like, well, we don't really know. And I was like, what's with your guys' little like chef hats? Like, I don't
Mhm.
know what any of this means. And like, what's the little string that attaches to the, it's just supposed to represent the priesthood. I'm like, in what capacity? Like, I don't get it. Like, what's the reasoning behind, give me the rationale, like, and I was just like, I wanted answers, and
Symbolism.
everybody's like, we don't know.
It's
Yeah, yeah. I
And
beautiful.
was,
Just
I
accept
know,
and
but
that.
like, I'm like, where does
you're
this
in the
symbolism come from?
celestial room. This is the one
Yes,
place you're supposed to be able to talk about it, and you're
yes.
thinking that you could get answers.
Right. Yes. And I was like,
That
okay,
was a
cool.
lie
Maybe I'll get
too.
some clarity. Yes. Oh, 100%. 100%. And I was like, it's not like I never had good feelings in the temple ever. It's not like every single experience was just the worst, but because like it's a very quiet place. So it's easy to feel like you can have some peace there. I really only ever felt like okay about like initiatories. I didn't really have too much of a problem with those. Some of the wording in that, eh. um some of that I think was a little sexist too, because I mean it was like very much like this, you get to be a queen and a priestess to your husband, and I'm like,
Mm.
no, I'm not a side piece, like I'm not a piece of property like DNC 132 likes to claim that all women are, but so yeah, like I didn't have as
Just
much
for
of
a
a problem
second.
with that one. Huh?
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, so
And the men,
yeah, with
it's
the
the men become kings and priests to God.
yeah,
So it's definitely a very much
yes,
like us to mortal men and then men to a deity.
You
yeah,
women have to
exactly.
go
So
through us in order to get to heaven.
yeah, and apparently there's no heavenly mother to really look forward to or look up to. I mean, apparently she's there, but there's probably like a bajillion of them, and who knows? Like, yeah, it's
And so,
the whole
Sheena,
thing is very insulting and demeaning to women, but yeah.
Yeah.
and in a way, and this what is it happens to everybody, right? Once you start to see that maybe there are gaps and holes, and you haven't been told everything, you kind of look back to things earlier. You look at yourself. it's like you're doing an inventory on your shelf, right? It's like one
Yes.
thing for me, like a long time ago when I was 8, maybe, why don't we have the golden plates? Right?
Yeah,
And so
exactly. Yeah.
we can look back at all these things, but so this is all these things are going on in your mind in 2022.
Yeah.
And what happens during 2023? What is going on with you? Are you continuing to go to church?
So yeah, at that point, like I'd gone to church the rest of 2022. And then in 2023, I things were really kicking into high gear at that point because I couldn't I couldn't stop finding things, and it was just adding up way better than anything ever had for the 35 years that I was in, or 34 years I was in the church at that time. And so by like the beginning of the summer of 2023, I had come across the conspiracy theory that Joseph Smith never had been a polygamist, and it all had started with Brigham Young, and things had just derailed because of Brigham Young and his, disgusting, lusty behaviors. So I was like, oh, thank goodness, like it's not all a lie. And it was like I was looking so hard for reasons that the church was still true. And that was really, I guess, kind of what I was trying to circle back to, was that I was trying to get my husband to understand, like, this, I'm not looking at these things because I'm trying to find reasons to leave. And that's what everybody is taught. And I was like, please listen to some of these other people's stories. The the recurring theme here is not that people were looking for a reason to leave because they were just sick of having to live a moral life or something ridiculous like that. They weren't leaving because, they got offended over something. Like, they're leaving because they started realizing that things were not connecting. And I said, just listen to these people's stories. And so he would listen to some of the stuff that I was bringing him. And also I had been listening to, like, I at this point I hadn't started listening quite as much to, like, the historians, who had dug really deeply into the history of polygamy. But I was like, okay, I'm trying to find reasons for why this could still work out, because I just felt again like my world was just wrecked.
And are
And
these
I was trying to
stories
figure out
that you want
it.
your husband to listen to, are they Mormon stories? Are
Yeah,
they John
yes.
Delaney?
So
Do you
yeah, some
remember
of it, yeah, mostly.
some of the stories you wanted your
Um,
husband to?
oh boy. There were, let's see.
Because like for
Well,
me,
okay,
Leah
so
and Cody Young was one for me
okay.
that I wanted my
Yeah.
wife to listen to.
Yeah. And I think for me, one of them was, well, it really was like the Lila Tuller one,
Hmm.
because she had talked about her dad talking about the second anointings. And so I had him watch, like, all the second anointing stuff. And maybe I'm putting this out of order. Maybe this happened after I realized that that conspiracy was false. That may have been actually a little bit later. Um, but yeah, it was either way. Like, I found out pretty quickly, by like the end of the summer, that that was just not, it didn't hold any water, and there was too much evidence showing that, yeah, it really did start with Joseph Smith, and
And
there's
that's the
just
one
It
thing I
not.
creates its
liked
own
that
problems. Yeah,
that's the
even if
one
it
thing I
like, even
liked
if it didn't. I'm
about
sorry,
Yeah.
Sheena.
Maven. Maven made it perfectly clear. In order to have Joseph Smith not practice polygamy, you have to disregard the testimonies of dozens of women.
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
And that was the thing. It was like, when I started thinking about that too, because I mean, some of the apologists will say, like, well, all these or the people who had this conspiracy were like, well, you have to remember too that a lot of these testimonies and the things that people started talking about were like decades after he died. And I was like, yeah, but people are, it's not like they're not going to remember whether or not they had sex with the prophet. Like,
Yeah.
that'd be a pretty big thing to forget. Just kind of like how Joseph Smith seemed to, like, forget whether or not he was visited by an angel to, from God to forgive his sins in the grove, versus like just Jesus or God and Jesus. It's like, no, those are enormous details that you're deviating from, like, you don't forget stuff like that. That'd be like forgetting you had gave birth to one of your kids. Like, that's nuts, you know?
Or
Like,
who you married.
doesn't make
Well,
any
I mean,
sense.
for him, it would make sense, but for us normal people that
Mm.
usually only do it once or twice, like, you wouldn't forget that person that
Yeah,
you're getting married to. Yeah,
right.
it's a big event, it's a
Exactly.
big deal. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, yes, I could totally imagine that any of those polygamous men would forget like who they were
Some of the middle ones.
hopping into bed with. But yeah, like
Yeah.
who they were hopping into bed with. But like, yeah, those women aren't gonna forget that. And it's like, yeah, it's too much of like an event to not remember that, you know. So yeah, so I was at that point I was starting to really feel hopeless because I was like, okay, so that turned out to be false and now I don't really have any hope there. Is there anything else I can possibly turn to try to make this better? And I had heard that yet again more changes had been made in the temple. Oh, and I guess I should go back to really quickly in 2022. I want to say it was 2022, either that or it was like the beginning of 2023, but I think it was 2022. And I was, you know, going through this. My husband knew I was having those problems. We did go to the temple together and we did some sealings and they had changed the wording so that it didn't say that anymore. And I had been praying so hard and I was like, oh my gosh, prayers answered. And I got to actually sit there and be a witness because they started letting women be witnesses. And I
To
was like, oh,
baptisms,
wow, amazing. Huh?
witnesses to baptisms, and what other things were women
Ceilings.
sealings?
So yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
So yeah, we were sitting there. I got to be a witness and I was like, okay, cool. Like that makes me feel better. But then yeah, fast forward again back to 2023. I I thought that conspiracy theory might be true. And then I was like, well, yeah, it makes basically no sense. And then discovered that no, there's no way that that could be true. And so then tried to go
Because
to
you're
the temple again because oh, go ahead.
are you sort of thinking, if I stop going, I have to tell my husband I'm not going to go, and he's going to go without me to
Well,
church? Are you thinking
I
that at
thought
all?
about that. Yeah, oh, definitely. Yeah, because I was like, I don't know. And my thought was too was like even if I discover and feel 100% that this is really not the true church, like what harm is there going to be in me just continuing to go every week? And I thought, whatever, I'll just continue to go as normal, you know. I've been going for almost 35 years at this point, like I'll just keep going. And that was kind of my thought by then. And I had heard, and because I hadn't been for a little bit to the temple, but I'd heard that more changes had been made again. And everybody was like, they're so amazing. And oh my gosh, it's all about Christ. It's so Christ-centered. It is a little bit longer again. It is like the full 2 hours again, and all the things. And I was like, okay. So then my friend in our ward offered to watch our kids. She's like, because she knew she knew I was like learning about some of this stuff, and I know she was concerned. And
Mm.
I was like, I don't know. I was spinning my wheels at that point, and she was like, "I'll watch the kids for you guys. You and your husband can go." And I mean, it was very nice of her. And we went, and it was the last time I went to the temple, because
And that was last
we went in.
August or something.
Yeah, it would have been like, yeah, around August, like end of August or something like that. And so we went to the temple together and did an endowment session, which I never liked endowment sessions that well to begin with. Like yeah, I couldn't ever totally, I don't know, I couldn't get on board with it. But yeah, so
What'd you think about
we
the
went and did
changes?
an endowment. Yeah, so the changes, I was like, okay, so they made it more, yeah, they did put a lot, a little bit more about Christ in there and making it more about Christ, which is great. Like I don't have anything against that, but it was like I just sat there feeling like, and I'd been praying so hard. I was like, just help me to feel something, like help me to feel like this is true and this is right. And I just didn't. I just didn't. So yeah, we went through, and I don't even remember everything about it because it was the last time I went through, and it was the only time I'd gone through where they had just made those other recent changes. But yeah, I went through and I was like, I don't see how this is that much better. And I don't see how
Did you
this,
think it's too little, too late?
yeah. And also by that point too, my mindset was like, I had already, I had already learned that Joseph Smith had basically stated that what was revealed to him about the temple ordinances were the true and correct and right way to do the ordinances. And now here, like over 200 years later, they're finally pulling out some of the sexist stuff or all the sexist stuff. And I'm like, it doesn't make sense to me that, the Lord's like, you know what, women just weren't ready to be treated as equals back then. So it was really for like, was it for us? Like,
Mm.
yeah, to keep it in there for so
No,
long? Like
right.
it's stupid. And I was like, yeah, so it really was. It was like it's too little too late. If this really had been from God, he would have, revealed it the way it was supposed to be the first time. And I remember trying to bring this up and people being like, well, prophets aren't, perfect. And, they'll put their own, sometimes, their own ideas are, may influence their
Then
decision
there's
making. I'm
no
like, then
point
how
in
are,
following a
that doesn't make any
prophet.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, that
Yeah.
doesn't make sense then, because then it's really not fully from God. And if it's not fully from God and it's not completely correct the way that God had revealed it to them, and they aren't implementing it in that exact way that he asked them to, isn't the whole idea that he's going to, like chastise them and remove them from their position or whatever and put somebody in
Yeah.
there who is going to do
It's
it?
apostasy.
And
We might as well be any
yeah,
other church or follow any other person who's like mostly
yeah,
there, but got a few things wrong. It's the same. It's
yeah, and it's
literally exactly the same.
yeah, and the Lord's like, yeah, well, I didn't want the sexist stuff in there, but it's fine. It's whatever. You're not perfect. Excuse me. Sorry, my
No,
excuse me.
no, I'll jump
Choking
in
on my
actually if you wanna if you need a second. But
no, you're good.
I remember like going to the temple. I mean, there's even the primary song like yeah, like going to the temple, like I'll go inside someday and I'll covenant with my father. I think it's in the second verse. I'll covenant with
Hmm.
my father. I'll promise to obey. It's in there. And but it's
Yeah.
only the men that covenant with the father, and it's the women who promise to obey. That's just kind of,
Yes.
obviously a little bit too nuanced for the children's song. But I remember feeling distinctly uh kind of hurt for that very because that's the very first one, the very first thing that you promise. And so I just seen the men promise to obey or hearken to God. And so then when it
Mhm.
was the women's turn, I thought, okay, now I'm gonna, promise to obey God. But then when it was to their husbands, and I didn't even have a husband, I was going through to go on a mission. I just remember feeling rejection actually kind of distinctly hurt that like
Yeah.
why because he's a father, he's our heavenly father, so why does my heavenly father, why doesn't he want to have this direct relationship with me where I'm promising
Exactly.
to obey him too? Why is he shuffling
Yeah.
me off on a mortal person? It hurt, yeah, because I thought I had a
Yeah.
personal relationship with God, so I just didn't see why he wouldn't want to do that. Why wouldn't that be direct? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And 100%. And that was how I felt too. And then I like the more I went to, the more I started thinking about Heavenly Mother. And like I had asked about Heavenly Mother when I was a young child because I remember thinking like, well, yeah, because even kids can see like, well, it takes like a mother and a father to have kids. And I was like, so we always talk about Heavenly Father, but what about Heavenly Mother? And I remember being told, oh, yeah, well, yeah, she's up there. She exists, And I'm like, well, why don't we ever talk about her? Well, we just don't know that much about her. Well, why not? Well, we just don't. It's like all these
We'll find out.
non-answers. I was like,
We'll
okay,
find out when we die.
Yeah.
Everything
yeah,
that
that,
all the questions will be
And
answered.
and stop asking. Don't ask about her.
yeah,
Stop
Ladies,
asking.
don't
can
ask.
you just just sit down and just
You don't
be good enough with that?
just,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah, just shut up
So,
and just take
so the
your,
temple,
take,
going to the temple doesn't answer your
oh
questions.
no,
Um,
no.
what happens from there from then on?
Yeah, so at the end of that session, I basically, my husband and I, we were in the celestial room, and I'm just sitting there kind of stewing and kind of steaming. And I'm like,
Fuming.
I'm sitting there and I'm asking, I'm like, okay, this doesn't make any sense to me. And if, and I brought up some of the things that I had brought up here where I was just like, why now? Like, why take all of this stuff out now? Like, women deserved to be treated as equally as men, well, since the beginning of time. But for sure, if this was God's church, why not during that restoration? Like, I don't even understand. Like, this doesn't add up. And I don't even remember what other points I brought up. They were probably more specific to whatever we saw in there. But I was just
And how
asking
did
all
he
these questions,
react?
and he was like looking around. I think there were only like maybe one or two other people in there, so it's not like it was a full room or something. But he's just kind of looking around. He's like, we're in the celestial room. Like maybe we should talk about this outside the celestial room. I was like, I don't care where we talk about it, but I I want my questions answered, and I don't feel like this is right, and I'm very upset right now, you know? And so, like,
I want to see the
we go
manager.
downstairs. Yeah, right. I'm like, I need answers for this crap. So yeah, we go downstairs and I'm just like starting to slip into like a depressive state. And we, go into the dressing rooms and I go in there and I'm just starting to get my stuff out and get changed. And I just broke down right there in the dressing room and I just like
Mm,
bawled for I don't know how many minutes. And I just sat there crying and thinking like, this is the worst I've ever felt. Like,
mm,
as far as this religion goes, I was like, this is the worst I've ever felt. And like, I just remember thinking like, either either God has just like let me down and hasn't answered my prayers, or this is the answer. And the answer is that this church is just not true. And I was like, I don't. And then of course there's always that temptation to want to put it back on yourself where it's like, well, it's probably because of your own bad attitude and you weren't able to feel the spirit. That's what it is,
You're not
right.
praying good enough.
Um,
You're not thinking good
yeah,
thoughts.
yeah. And I was just like, no, I was like, that's not it though, because I have been trying my damnedest, like to figure out how this all fits together and still make this religion make sense, you know? And so we're like, we get into the car and I just am not saying a word because I'm still very, very touch sensitive at this point. And I'm like, if I start talking, I'm going to just start crying again. And so we're, on our way home and I start crying anyway. And I'm like looking out the window. My husband's like, what's going on? And I'm just like, you know, he's like, it seems like you keep, the more you look into these things, like the further away you're getting. And I was like, that's when I came to him and I was like, I am not looking for reasons to leave the church. I am looking for reasons to stay in the church. I was like, this is one of the reasons I went to the temple today. Like, I'm doing everything I can, to try to stay here. And I none of these reasons are good. They're not good enough anymore. And I was like, because they don't make any sense, And so anyway, I think that was when he really kind of caught the vision on where I was coming from. And I think that was probably more when he started watching some of the um, like interviews with
Videos.
other people and their experiences. Yeah. And he really, yeah, when I showed him the different ones about the second anointing, he was not, yeah, he was like, oh yeah, that doesn't make sense. That's not okay. He's like, I don't know how that's justified. And I'm like, yeah, well, and think about the way that these men in positions of power at the head of this church operate. I mean, and we're seeing more and more how they operate this church business, and it's very much done under the guise of it being this, pious religion. Um,
An actual
it's
church when it's not, it's a sole
yeah,
corporation. Yep.
it's really just a business, and they're really profiting off of people's belief in the next life. And that's literally all Joseph Smith did. I mean, he just capitalized on getting people to pony up over a belief
Mhm.
of something in the next life that he didn't have to know anything. Like that's why it was so easy because he was able to make it up and be like, yeah, well, in the next life, because I mean, what's more comforting than knowing what's going to happen in the next life? Because nobody really
Yeah.
knows, but it's a really comforting thing, I think, that people feel like, oh, if I know what's going to happen, like that'll make me feel better. um
Yeah, and
and
a very
so
convenient place to put all of the promises, for,
exactly,
the things
that he
that
doesn't have to
they're
fulfill.
benefiting in this life, yeah,
Yeah,
and all the things that you'll get will all happen in the next, for sure, for sure. It's
yeah.
very, very
And the
convenient.
same thing is exactly, and it's still happening today, and I don't know to what degree like some of these men really do, you know hold to this belief, or how much they really do believe it. But in my mind, it just seems like because they have access to all of the history, and whoever's in the seat of the prophet has access to the prophet's vault, like they have to in some part know some of it. It just, I don't know how they wouldn't know in some part at least the actual true history. And also because they have to make all the major like approving decisions on a lot of this stuff that is going out to the members. So I just don't believe that they just are necessarily up there innocently going, "Oh, I didn't know about this," I just don't see how that would I don't see how that would work.
Yeah.
So
So
is
I
there a
just,
point where your husband comes along around?
yeah, so I think that was a really big point was just seeing like the whole secret second anointing thing and learning about what was in that, because for him it was like, wait, you're allowed to basically do whatever you want short of murdering somebody because your seat in heaven is secure. He was like,
Yeah.
that's not okay. And I was like, yeah, yeah. So I mean, who knows? Like some of these guys could be, drinking sinful coffee, and cheating on
Or
their
much
wives or
worse.
whatever.
Honestly, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I think the only exception to like lose your second anointing there is like denying the Holy Ghost and like murder in cold blood. So it's still not even like
Yeah.
flat out murder. Like there's still justifiable murder. But
Oh,
child
right. Yeah.
molestation's not there. Like they could be
Yeah.
a child molester. That won't ruin it for them.
Yeah.
There's just a lot. Yeah.
That one I hadn't even thought of, but yeah, and yeah, what a horrible thing to think of. And there's already, like Gina and I were talking about earlier, there's already like so much of that I also discovered in the church. I had no idea the churches, um, their process of dealing with, pedophiles and child
Yeah.
A
molesters
lot
and
of news
abusers
came
in the
out
church.
last year
Oh,
about abuse
yeah, it
cover up.
did. Yeah, it did. And I mean, it's devastating. I had no idea that there was no mandatory reporting and that it was almost kind of discouraged because the church cares more about their PR than they care about actual children and abuse
Yeah.
victims,
Yeah.
which it's like,
Yeah.
no, sorry, there's no way that that's God's church. That goes against everything Christ even taught. So I don't see how that makes any sense. But yeah, so my husband, he's been actually listening to lately. He's been listening on audio to Fawn McKay Brodie's "No Man Knows My History." So he's been
Mm.
kind of going through that, and he's like, "Well, I want to hear like the actual like books from like historians and different people like that." And I was like, yes, do, like, please don't take my word for it because I have nothing to prove here. The church does. So, and they can't prove it. They can't prove that they're the true church, based on all the evidence being completely 180 degrees the other direction. So, yeah,
So
that's
do you
kind
have
of
like
where
a last Sunday that you attended?
I did. Yeah. So it's probably, let's see, it would have been, I think, like around Halloween sometime or like right after Halloween. Um, I think I went
It
and
makes sense. It's the devil's holiday, I guess.
and I've always loved the
Right?
Devil's Holiday. I've always been a fan of Halloween. So,
It's
um,
fun.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is fun. I love Halloween. So, yeah, my husband had asked me, I think after that temple experience, he was like, "So, are you just not going to go anymore? Or, I mean, what's this going to look like now?" And I was like, I don't know yet. Like, I mean, I'm trying to figure this out. I didn't ask for any of this to happen. I was that I thought I was doing something good. I thought I was doing something faithful. And to, come to find out all the actual truth. And I was like, I didn't plan for any of this. And so I was like, I don't know. I was like, I don't see the harm in it. I'll probably still go with you guys, but I don't believe that this is true. So I was like, it's fine, I'll just go. And so that lasted, I think, like a couple of weeks. And by that second week, I just couldn't anymore. I was sitting there in Relief Society and I was like, oh, this is so hard to listen to, especially with the state of mind that I was in because I was so raw. And I was like, all I could think about was that everybody was sitting in there just, in this echo chamber, reinforcing these beliefs that are based on lies and talking about the Book of Mormon and like the people that are in it as if they were real people and a real civilization. And thinking like, could you imagine being in 3 days of darkness and like stuff like that? And that's what these people had to go through. And I was like, no, they didn't, because they literally didn't exist. and it was just hard to like sit through and hear these
Mm.
testimonies being born and people thinking that they were feeling the spirit testify to them that this was true. And I was like, oh my gosh, like it was just an awakening. I was like, I can't listen to people unknowingly lie to themselves and each other. Like I was like, and it's not
Yeah,
like I can,
members of the
if I were to
church
stand up
think
and say something.
oh, no,
Yeah,
yeah, that definitely wouldn't fly. No, people it's funny when members of the church, like the woman who offered to babysit for you to go to the temple, because they think like, "Oh,
yeah,
you're getting away from the source of the spirit, so if you can go to the temple,
yeah,
if you can keep going to church, if you keep reading the Book of Mormon, like, that'll fix things," but I in once you
Primary
get to this
answers.
point, yeah, that it's actually much
yeah,
worse. I feel like you could almost stay longer if you are able to take a bit of a break or at least or not be so committed, but they don't. Yeah, I think it really that your temple experience shows that once you start to see, I guess, how the sausage is made, then,
yep.
like, going back to the store, like, doesn't help you, it just doesn't
No.
do what they think. It has the opposite effect actually of what they're
So
hoping,
Yeah,
will
so
happen.
your fall came in the
really.
fall.
Yeah.
Yeah, hey, there you go. I didn't
And your
make that
husband
connection
was
before.
shortly after. Yeah, so that's good because I know that's something that can be really difficult for couples, and you had that, period for a while, but it seems like overall, he was
Yeah.
there with you. And then what about your kids that you have kids and what ages are they? Were they too young to
Yes.
really, like, be affected by this,
Oh,
or were they
yeah, they're pretty young. Yeah, so like my daughter, she turned 8 last May, and so we did the whole baptism thing, and I was thinking that was also another thing that I thought like, okay, this will really help, ground me again and this will be like a really good spiritual experience to help me remember, like why the church is true and I mean it was a nice experience and everything. But I didn't come away from it going, okay, yes, like problem solved. It didn't really do anything. So I mean, I was just excited, for my daughter and that it was her birthday and stuff, but I was like, yeah, I took issue too with the fact that I was like, well, 8-year-olds really can't make life-altering decisions for themselves, and this is kind of stupid when I think about
Because
it.
when they're 8, they can
Yeah.
decide to be baptized, but they have to
Yeah.
wait till they're 18 to decide to unbaptize it, to undo
Yeah.
that
Which
covenant.
is that is just yeah, that is just nuts. And I started thinking about that like after we went through her baptism and I was like, yeah, when I was 8 years old, did I really feel like I had a handle on knowing what was true, or was I literally just doing what I was told, and repeating what my parents had reinforced throughout my life, you know? And I was thinking, she's literally just going to do the same thing. Like she's 8. There's,
Yeah, that stage developmentally, family relationships and parental relationships are still extremely important, so the
yes,
community pressure is more important to children at that age, and so it isn't really which amazes me when there are an occasional 8-year-old that's like, "No, I don't wanna do this," because that is really against
yeah,
the grain. It's
that
going
is
along
like
with
a rare
pressure.
exception.
Yeah, is where
Yeah,
they're at. Not peer pressure, but parental pressure. It's their peers don't matter quite as much yet. It's that parental approval is still really huge at that age, and so that's really the best age to do it if you want, if you want him to be old enough, but not too old to really start,
yes.
I guess, rebelling. So it's just when your opinion and your desire for them to do that probably matters the most
Old
is
enough
at
to
that
Yes.
make it
age.
look like you're making a real decision based on
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly.
complete knowledge of what you're doing.
Exactly. And yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's kind of how I felt about it too, which is why I actually one of the earlier issues that I started considering even way before I started looking into all of the information on the history of the church was I realized one day and I know that they had like the church had done away with this quite a few years back now, but we used to have kids going up in fast and testimony meeting and bearing their testimonies, and parents would whisper to them like what to say. And then they stopped doing that. And I was like, I wonder why they stopped doing that. And then I was like, I don't know if this is the reason, but I feel like actually it's just like a way to just get kids to believe in something that they don't actually know for themselves, you know? And then I started thinking more about it and I was like, maybe that's what's happened throughout all of our lives. You know, we've just been repeating the same thing over and over and to each other. And we've had it repeated to us by adults and authority figures in our lives throughout our lives growing up in this church. Of course, we're going to believe it's true because it's been told to us several times over and over, and
And
we've
in a way,
continued to repeat it to ourselves over and over.
that's a pattern that we've actually had experienced even as 8-year-olds and 9-year-olds and 10-year-olds.
Yeah.
Santa Claus. We believed
Oh,
in
yeah.
Santa Claus when we were young because we were told Santa
Yeah.
Claus existed. Then
Yeah.
we found out otherwise. Same thing with the Easter Bunny, the Tooth Fairy, right? So there's
Yeah.
this pattern where we can believe stuff that people tell us that
Yes.
are
Yes,
completely
exactly.
false.
Because
And
we
then all of a
trust
sudden,
them.
Yeah,
yeah,
and with no like critical thinking skills applied, because that's not what it's based on. It's based on, do you get a good feeling? It's like, well, yeah, but I get a good feeling about eating that bowl of ice cream. That doesn't mean the spirit told me to do it. You know, like
ice
Yeah.
cream,
I just
wait,
wanted some
ice
ice
cream
cream,
is
you know?
true.
Yeah, yeah, it's the truth.
Don't
It's what God
don't
wants for me.
disrespect ice cream
Yeah.
on my
Oh,
show.
yeah, it's just no, I love ice cream, Gene. Trust me. But it's funny though because it's like, yeah, when you really sit and think about it, you're like, yeah, that doesn't make like a ton. You can manifest your own good feelings, you know? Like if you just start, thinking positive thoughts about yourself or about something or whatever it is that is in front of you at the time, if you want to manifest positive, feelings, you can, and I think a lot of people define that as just being, oh, it was the spirit. It's like, I don't know. I don't think so. But I feel like that's pretty common with people in the church anyway, where they're just like, oh, I felt the spirit here. I felt the spirit there. I felt the spirit everywhere. And I'm like, I don't know why you're always feeling the spirit. Cause like, I don't know. I've had other experiences in my life where I'd heard um, other people tell me stories about getting like a very distinct impression or feeling that they needed to do something and be at a
Mhm.
certain place and for a certain person. And these weren't just people like, yeah, I mean, I've heard that with a probably like a handful of people in the church who've told stories
There's a
like
good
that. But then
video.
outside the church,
Yeah.
I've heard it with people who were never members, who were part of other religions or other belief systems, and they're like,
Yeah.
I just got this feeling, and it ended up being right. And I was like, that is interesting
And there's
because
a
when I was younger, I couldn't figure out how to make that make sense with our religion because I was super in at that point, and I was like, well,
there's
that couldn't be right, you know.
there's a good video called Spiritual Witnesses on YouTube that
Yeah.
talks about how almost everybody in every church believes that their church is true or believes
Yeah.
that God is talking to them or that they're in
Yes.
the exact place that God wants them to be. And they get a witness all over, right? And so anyhow, so you didn't go to church in, let's say, November and December. And then
Yeah.
in the middle of January, you decide to make a Facebook post.
Yeah, I was feeling the pressure because the bishop had sent the missionaries to kind of come check on us. And I was like, I was not in the mood for that. And I mean, to his credit, like very nice bishop. He actually even sent us a card, uh, like a couple weeks back or so. And like he was getting released that Sunday. He's like, I'm gonna be released in just like, a couple hours. But I just wanted to reach out and like, I know you didn't want to be bothered, but I just want you to know I care about you. And, very, very sweet man. So I mean, and I never had anything against him. I was very angry at the time with all the stuff that I had learned.
Mhm.
I was angry at the church and I didn't want that to come out to the bishop or at the missionaries or anybody because I was like, I know I'm going to word vomit all over these people if I have to,
Yeah. Yeah.
be around them and they start trying to, do missionary work here. And I was like, I'm not interested in that. So they had knocked on our door and I was like, yeah, it's not a good time. My husband's not here anyway. So, I'll let you know. And then they text me like a week or two later, something like that. And they're like, hey, how about, this Saturday or whatever? And I'm like, look, we're really not interested, sorry. So, so yeah, then shortly after that, that's when we had gotten a text from like the ward secretary who was like, the bishop would like to meet with you both. And I was like, no. I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And I was like, also, he's too nice of a man. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. Because I know I won't behave well. So, um, yeah, then I finally was like, I don't know what to do. I was starting to get a little panicked. And so I was telling my husband, I was like, okay, I was like, I have been trying to rack my brain, figuring out how I'm going to come out with this new information about myself for a while, and I've been putting it off. And I was like, I'm not a big social media person. I rarely get on Facebook. Um, and I was like, but it was literally the only way I could think to like let a lot of people know all at once. And I was like, I literally don't know any other way to do this. And I would think I would just rather rip this Band-Aid off than have to go through this, every time I see somebody new
Onesie
that I haven't
twosie.
seen in a while. Yeah. And I was like,
Mm.
ugh. I was like, that sounds exhausting. And I'm completely kaput at this point with all of this. And just, yeah, I just felt over it. And so I was like, okay, I'm just going to make a dumb video and just put it out there and put out my reasoning, and hopefully people will understand where I'm coming from. Um, and I was like, and I was really nervous about it too. It took me like an hour or two to actually post it after I made it, because I was like, maybe this is a dumb idea. Maybe this is a bad idea. And I was just worried about
Did
how
you
people
like
were going to perceive
re-listen
it.
to it a couple times to see if you said anything you
I
didn't like?
I did. I think I listened to it once or twice. And then I was like, maybe I shouldn't post this. But then I started listening to other people's stories again online, and I was like, you know what? No, I'm gonna do this. Like, there's nothing wrong with anything that I said. I'm gonna stand by it. And if
It's
these people can
authentically your
share,
story.
yes, exactly. And I was like, if these other people can share like these really difficult experiences about coming out of the church, then I can definitely share this. And then I was like, I'll post it to YouTube, and then I'll just like link it to Facebook. And that way anybody else who's going through this, like they can maybe see this, if it ever comes up one day. And I hadn't really had any plans beyond that. Um, and I was like, I'll link it there, and maybe it'll help somebody. And so then on Facebook,
Those kind of
I
posts
posted it,
helped
and then
me. 'Cause if you're
yeah,
going back to what we were talking about, with, like, not knowing who to text or who to what, because, I mean, first of all, doing a public announcement is not something everyone chooses to do, and I was gonna
right.
ask you why, but you kinda answered it, is that you didn't wanna have to keep having this individual conversation over, but some people do just
Yeah.
do a fade, or they are on social media, but they start wearing their tank tops, and they let people,
Yeah.
figure it out kind of from the context clues, so,
Color their
um,
hair purple.
colored it purple, yeah. I didn't do a public post, and I actually still haven't, but, after the first misstep with a friend that I thought was maybe out that wasn't, I thought about who had made Facebook posts in the past that did announce it, because I did know for sure that I could talk to them. So I did actually make a few connections to people years after the fact. I
Mhm.
was disappointed and devastated when those posts first went up. But yeah, years later when I was going through it, so there's pros and cons to deciding to do that or not. And I
Yeah.
think, yeah, I think it does help people. I think even if I'm assuming you probably had somebody at least reach out to you, but if not yet, I
Oh,
bet
yeah.
it would happen. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
definitely. Yeah, it was actually pretty amazing to see how many people actually had reached out to me saying, like, I went through my faith crisis this many years ago, or like, I actually had one or two people on Messenger reach out to me in private because they were like, hey, saw your post, and we've been going through the same thing, but we're just, like, we don't want to let our family know because they would be devastated. And we're pretty much feeling like this church isn't true. And things like that. And they're like, thank you so much. Like, I had so many people telling me like, thank you for sharing your experience and for putting it into words, the words that I've been thinking about for so long. Like, these were these were all the things I was thinking and feeling when I decided to leave. And I was like, oh, amazing. Well, good. Like, I'm glad that I did something that was helpful to anybody because I didn't want this to come across as like being selfish or like I was trying to like draw attention to myself or something. But I was like, I don't know. Like, I just wanted it to be out there and be done with. And I don't like sitting and writing lengthy posts. And I've seen people do that too. And it's, it's a quieter version of doing it. I was like, I'm just going to make a video because it's going to be a lot easier for me. And so, yeah, after I did that and I had gotten that feedback from people saying like, oh, I loved, the way that you said the things that you said. And I was like, okay, great. Well, that felt pretty good then. And then I was like, maybe this is what I should do then. Maybe I should start just making posts, onto YouTube of my experiences and that way I have like a personal outlet to just be able to spew all of my feelings all over the place and I was like nobody's going to see it probably for a really long time anyway if it ever comes up in somebody's feed. And I honestly was just like nobody's going to see this for years and this is just going to be my little like space for myself. But then people did see it and I was like, whoa, wait a minute, like I'm getting like hundreds and then even like thousands of views on some of these videos. And I was like, I don't even know how that happened. Like, I don't know. Yeah, I was like, I don't know how to do all this stuff, but I was like, that's crazy. So yeah, like I just put it out there. And so then people were like saying a lot of the same things that I got on Facebook, which was like, I think people like having experiences that they can relate to and know that they're not alone. And that's how I felt, listening to a lot of other people's stories through these different channels and like on Mormon Stories podcast and stuff. It was like, you can really easily just pinpoint those same um, the same process of, thinking of like, learning about different points in church history and trying to, figure out how it works into, God's true church. And yeah, just especially when it comes to the side of motherhood and like womanhood in the church and like listening to everybody's experiences about how they felt receiving like a lot of these messages about well like your ultimate goal is to be a mom and um beyond anything else and it's like well okay yeah that's great but what if and I'm not trying to diminish motherhood because I am a mom and I love my kids, but it always felt like nothing else actually ultimately matters, just that you're a mom.
Mhm.
And I was like, but I don't feel like the men are getting that same message.
No,
Maybe I'm wrong, but I just
no,
didn't
and
feel like it was,
I think in a way it
happening.
kind of cheapens motherhood too by either forcing it or by just
Yeah.
assuming it for all women. I think, not all people are meant to be parents, men and women. There's some that just really, really shouldn't be,
Yeah.
and um, yeah, I that's something that I felt. I mean, I'm not a mother. I certainly won't be a biological mother at any point,
Mhm.
but that wasn't for lack of trying in my younger years. But
Yeah.
that's something that I don't know. I feel kind of it's weird that as someone who like will be childless, I still feel I get some kind of possession or ownership over the childbirth aspect, and that's one of the biggest problems I feel like I have with the church is I feel like they took that from us, and it's mine and it's yours. I feel like it's
Yeah.
ours to decide to do when we want it and how often
Yes.
and yeah,
100.
it's empowering that that I just think that that's ours, that should be ours, and not something that
Yeah.
we're being told to do by the men, before we're ready or more often than we're ready, at the expense of our health and, at the expense of our family's comfort, if there's too many, if finances are rough, or our own mental health, and then we can't even be there for the kids. I just feel like they've really, denigrated motherhood in a lot of ways by
Yeah.
the messaging they have around it, and I think that that's unfortunate.
Just the
Yeah.
fact that
I
there's a
agree.
phrase in existence that says barefoot and pregnant says a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I always,
and that's
even
kind
when
of
I was
broader patriarchy thing. Yeah.
yeah, it is, and that always made me super pissed when I would hear people say that, and I was like, "Hmm, yeah, I have too many thoughts on that," but Yeah, it just one of the things that always, yeah, made me upset was the fact that this idea is pushed that, yeah, if you just have children, I mean, and I guess this goes for the men too a bit because it's like, get married as young as you can. It doesn't matter if you're financially stable. It doesn't matter what's going on. It doesn't matter what your health issues. I mean, I've never heard anybody say out like directly, like it doesn't matter what your health issues are, but some of that I feel like is somewhat implied, or at least it was like in the past. I feel like
They
they're a lot
coded
more conscious about that stuff now.
vanity
Yeah.
or your discomfort, that's
Yes.
kinda how they you're uncomfortable. That's yeah, that
Yeah, but
we'll
that's
call
what
it that.
this is what you're for. This is what women are for. It's like, no, I'm not
Yeah,
just for popping children out. And like it does cheapen it because then it kind of does give you like this bad taste in your mouth surrounding it. And it is a beautiful thing. Like, I love my kids. I love having kids, but it was like it was really difficult when we were first married, deciding like, okay, yeah, we're gonna have babies. And I may have touched on this in the last one, so I'll try to be brief. But like, my husband was 31 when we got married, and I was 25, and so we were a little bit older compared to the standard in Mormonism for people getting married, and so there was that pressure, but then there was like the pressure of like of um of just having faith in general, where it's like, you know what, yeah, like we're super broke, we just got married, but it's all gonna work out. So let's just
Lord
start
will
a family
provide.
and like the Lord's gonna bless us. And it's like that is not how things panned out. Like that was not it's
Yeah.
not like the Lord was like, you know what, you had one of my children. Now your
Here's
husband's getting like
$50,000.
10 raises.
Yeah,
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 like, it didn't work out that way. And so just yeah, things that we had attributed to being blessings for having kids, those things still happen, and we're not having kids every single time my husband gets a raise, like he would get, like a raise or a promotion like after each kid, and we're like right after each kid, and we're like, whoa, amazing. And I'm like, yeah, but we're not having kids anymore. And like that's still happening. So
That's
I don't
right.
know. I
So
guess I can attribute it to something else.
your very first video was what people say when Mormons leave, and that's up to
Yeah.
7,000 views now.
Yeah.
And your channel has now 298 subscribers. Is it 298? Is it
Yeah.
398?
I think it's 298.
298.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so you have 11 videos, and you are a podcaster now. You're a
Yeah, I
YouTuber.
guess
How does that feel?
yeah. It kind of weird because I didn't ever I mean I
And
thought about
on top of
starting a
that,
YouTube channel in the past, but huh?
this is your second appearance on one of the top
Oh,
Mormon land
that's right.
shows.
I
I'm
wouldn't
curious
have
where
accepted an
you see
invitation
your
from anybody but the best. So
there you go. I'm wondering where do you see or what are your hopes for your channel and, where it's gonna go? And, um, is
um
it perpetual, or do you think there'll be kind of a cycle and, um, you'll end it after a year or 2? Or I don't know, what are you thinking now?
I don't know. Because originally like I thought about dabbling. I've dabbled in YouTube in the past and thought about starting a channel, but I never thought about starting it in this space. Well,
Mm,
also because at that time too, I wasn't thinking about the problems with the church or leaving it. But so, but I didn't really know how to start one and didn't really know what to do with it. So I was like, well, whatever. That's, not a priority in my life. So for this though, I was thinking, well, I don't want it to continue to be a space where everybody's always feeling like they're living the same thing over and over, the same phase of their life over and over, because eventually you do want to come to a healing point. And I
mhm.
think overall that's kind of the direction I would like to take it is to a place of healing and not just we're sitting, talking about the things that made us upset, which is very therapeutic for a lot of
Yeah,
people, and being able to, like I said, identify with other people's experiences and stories in the church, but hopefully find ways to view things so that they can see it in a more positive way coming out. and be able to still move forward and move on. And that's kind of really my goal. So I
This
don't
might
know
be
how I'm going to do
an
that.
episode for you. Might be how to live your authentic life. I'm still
Yeah.
trying to figure that out, even still.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are things called Thrive that are
Oh,
events to
yes.
help people do that. Um,
Yeah.
Maven and I were at one in St. George at the beginning of March, and we got a
There's one
few,
going on right now in Scotland.
I
Yeah.
heard about
and
that
in
one.
Idaho
Yeah.
just happened.
Oh, in Idaho just happened? Yeah.
Oh, I thought
Yeah.
I
And
saw
that's
something about that.
thrivebeyondreligion.com if our viewers are looking for that. And that can be, I
Okay.
think, for a lot of people, and for me, it was the first place that I kind of moved the deconstruction offline to real people, and I found that really helpful
Okay.
too, so that's definitely a resource. But
Oh,
yeah,
that's
I think
awesome.
there's starting to be a lot more content about the healing part of the journey and the moving on and moving out
Yeah.
and moving above. And I think that's really great. And that's one thing I like about our community in general. I mean, coming
Yes.
from Mormonism, there's a lot of unhealthiness and drama, and then it's almost impossible not to also bring that into the space. We're kind of
Oh,
emotional
yeah.
babies sometimes. Yeah, there's a lot of learning and growth,
Yeah.
but it's pretty common to have people say something like, I'm ready to move on. I don't really want to. I don't want to be in the Reddit. I don't want to watch these podcasts anymore. I'm ready to live my life.
Right.
And I feel overall the result is positivity. And I've always encouraged that and congratulated people when they share that. It's like,
Right.
great, just you're a butterfly. You've got your wings, and life can be beautiful. And I really I like that. I don't know, it's something that has been criticized about our community, kind of from the TBM side, was that almost that they were
Right.
trying to kind of create the same thing that Mormonism was, but ex-Mormonism, but, like, we can't hold on to people, or we can't, like, make them stay, and it's like, that's not even the point.
It's like, that's not the point though. Yeah, exactly. We're
Yeah,
not
yeah.
claiming to be God's one and only true church and that you need to be here in
Right.
order to be saved. We're just trying to help you on whatever direction you're going. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's and I
That's
do
good.
Yeah.
appreciate that about like your guys' podcast and like Mormon stories and a lot of the other ones out there that are they provide that space where it's like you get to be able to share those experiences and feel validated, because that's so incredibly important, is that you feel so alone when you're going through the process and you don't feel validated and you question yourself, because that's what you've been taught to do by the church your whole life, is
Yeah.
question your own suspicions, and they still do that. And I mean, it just, yeah, it makes me sad. And my last video that I did last week was literally about a relative who, came to me with that kind of a thought, because they just, they were watching conference and they had to bestow that spiritual witness upon me, um, and implore me to return, and all that. And I was like, look, you you have to understand that I'm not coming from a place where, you know, I I I've looked at everything at this point. I'm not coming from a place where I'm trying to get you out or I'm reaching out to anybody who is a member. I'm not trying to get anybody out of the church. It's a personal endeavor. I'm not going to actively seek out people to make sure that, they
Yeah.
know what I know. They have to
And you
come
can't
to my
yeah,
space to do that.
you
If
have to
if
be
they're
ready
already
for it. Yeah.
yeah, it has to be their decision. Like, I'm not gonna force them into that. So I was like, what you're kind of doing to me is like you're actively seeking me out to try to pull me back, and I've already made my decision. But like you're coming from a place of one one thought process and like one idea of information or ideology that you've been told. And I'm coming from a place where I've looked beyond that at other things and made a decision, based on
You've
more
checked
information
the
than just what I was
Yelp
told.
reviews, we'll say.
What's what's that?
You've checked the Yelp reviews and the consumer
Yeah,
reports
yeah,
thoroughly.
exactly. Yeah,
And
exactly.
so Sheena,
So,
thank you so much for being on
mhm,
our show. Maven and I
yeah,
started this endeavor because we recognized that there were smaller podcasters out there that it would be really good if their shows were publicized and considered by people. The Mormon Stories channel has, like 4,000 hours or whatever it is. There's lots of large podcasting, and we thought that the smaller podcasts that were out there needed a way to be promoted and honored. And it's an amazing thing to think that you're going to say what you want to say and put it out there publicly. It's an honorable thing. And so we're so grateful to have you on, and we encourage our listeners to head on over to Sheena's content, and
links in the description.
We'll be in the description, a link to just go down there. And is there any last words from either of you? Nope.
It was a pleasure to be invited on by you guys, and I'm so glad that you guys created this space for people like me, and I appreciate that. I really appreciate being asked about my story. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. And so thanks everyone for watching. Like, subscribe, and share, and all those good things. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Good.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.